What is going on, Secondhand Talent family? It is Steiner here with another episode of Secondhand Talent, the podcast. Thank you, as always, to Luke Chu for the desk candy, to Mark Spusta for the art on my shirt, to Laurel Bayleaf of Bayleaf Studios for the beanie with the boognish on it. Thank you to Ween for the music, and thank you, of course, to my tiny co-host, Tiny Steiner. But most importantly, thank you to you, our listeners, readers, and viewers around the world, and thank you to this week's guest, Mike V., a sober fan. Thank you for being on the show, Mike. Welcome to Secondhand Talent.
Hello there. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
This is going to be what I hope is a really interesting conversation, especially based on everything we talked about leading up to it. Folks, this is an atypical one. This is a real atypical one. So Mike is a sober fan, and what we're going to do with this interview here is we're going to try to talk about what that experience is like from before to after. But out of curiosity, before we get into all that, we got connected in a very interesting. How was it that you found out about me again?
I believe it was at Set Break, at maybe a Spafford show, and so somebody saw my one show at a time sticker and said, "Hey, there's this podcast, and would you be willing to come on it and talk about your experience with going to shows sober?"
That's awesome. I don't even know what to say. That's really awesome. I mean, out of curiosity, when you first heard that the name of the podcast was called Secondhand Talent, what's the first thing that came to mind when you heard the term?
A little bit of Second City, because we're in Chicago, and I don't know, just maybe a touch of humility, like not the first-hand talent, but second-hand talent, like you're comfortable with your, what you're doing here, and
you're in the house band. You're a studio musician. You've got your role. You're set into it. You're not necessarily under the flashing lights, but you're helping make the train move.
Right.
It's pretty much how we make the sausage. That's pretty much the exact recipe for what it is. And there is a small air of humility in it. For quite some time, I did stand-up comedy, and I think I'm pretty funny, but I'm not, incredibly funny like those really talented comedians that get Netflix specials all the time. Like, I'm not that funny guy, and I make myself laugh with how not funny I am. That being said, if you need a reliable 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, throw me up there. Give me a few minutes to prepare, and I'll keep an audience warm for you. If you're a stage manager, I'm a stage manager's like perfect scenario. I can be an MC. I can make last minute announcements. I can do PSAs. I can do improv. I can do stand up. So it was this really cool utility opportunity, and it really allowed me to be a part of that machine that was not recognized, that was not seen at all, even though I felt like I was working my tail off. And I always considered myself kind of a secondhand comedian in that aspect. And so Secondhand Talent, I don't think the talent is necessarily less in the sense of the show, not me. Talent here is less. But the talent of the people who I have on the show, it's no less than the people who are on stage. It's just not on stage.
Okay.
So I was looking for a platform that was asking for those stories and couldn't find it. And here we are. And your story, I think, is really important because I the more I think about it. Well, first tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? And how did you get into music? Like what was your what were your first bands that really brought you into the music scene? What were some of your first concerts? Tell us a little bit about yourself. I just talked way too much.
Okay, I was born in the south suburbs of Chicago, and growing up, I was a skateboarder, and I was into punk rock. I loved punk music, Minor Threat, 7 Seconds, you know, Suicidal Tendencies, and Fugazi, and uh, used to go up to the Riv and all the other places up north, and uh, get bounced around in mosh pits and stuff. And I played hockey as well, so I was wasn't afraid of a little physical contact. And
You're basically practicing for concerts on ice.
right, right, yeah, and yeah. So a lot of punk rock growing up, and like my dad would play the classic rock station, and so I was heard of plenty of the mainstream classic rock music, which you know would be also the Grateful Dead, Truckin', Touch of Grey was on MTV when I was a kid, and
Or that was the music video with the skeletons, right?
right, right,
Yeah,
and
I remember that.
uh, like Uncle John's band, some of the more mainstream Grateful Dead songs, and uh, it wasn't until like college where I actually started to listen to more Grateful Dead. And my freshman year of college, I had a guy on the floor, and he was like, "The Grateful Dead are playing in Detroit," and I went to ISU, so Bloomington Normal, and he was going to Detroit to see a show, and I was like, "I can't go tonight. Like, there's class tomorrow," and he's like, but he was all about that already, going traveling to see shows, and that was 1991, so the Grateful Dead were good then.
Oh
And
wow.
I
Yeah, that's one of my favorite years. Yep. That's a
right.
good year to see the Grateful Dead if there ever was one.
So but I failed to go, and I regret that. Was trying to be somewhat responsible, and I ended up flunking out of my freshman year of college, and I came back home and met up with some people from high school, and we'd go to Allman Brothers shows. So the Allman Brothers were like some of my, you know, first shows where we were like, taking LSD and, drinking a lot, you know.
And in the early 90s, at those, at those shows, so let's say Allman, right? Is that just it didn't really matter who you were, like everybody was just kind of doing whatever at the time.
Oh yeah. It was, let your freak flag fly, um, no cameras around, like, it,
You know, that's speak on that for a minute because that's something that I think a large segment of our regular listeners, readers, and viewers don't really understand is that time before technology was so pervasive. I'm not even talking about after people had those primordial cell phones, but like before those, before cameras were a possibility on that scale. What was it like being at shows in that scene, like with substances? Like were cops and like talk to us? Like what was the show experience like?
well, it was, you still didn't flaunt it or anything, uh, it was it was still illegal, and so if you smoking weed, you really kept it, down, and you didn't, flaunt it or anything, and you know,
I guess everything else you just kind of is either smaller or more concealable, and it just, I mean, it then being a part of how often were you going to concerts in that at that point in your life?
uh, I would probably be going like monthly or so. I mean, eventually I was going like it seemed like every weekend I was going because if I fast forward a little bit to like 1998 when Dark Star Orchestra was playing every Tuesday at Martyrs, so that was pretty cool to go up there every week and uh, probably, smoke since it was a smaller venue, smoke before you go in and maybe a little bit during the show, but you really had to keep it down. And like the Vic was really tough for, they had off-duty policemen that worked there, and they were really tough there. So uh,
I mean, I guess I'm kind of curious. Was the scene was it in such a way that going to shows became more of a vehicle for usage and knowing that like you'll like because a show like every weekend like unless you're playing in a band or producing shows that's a lot of shows. I would hazard for the average person for year in year out. So I'm curious what your relationship was like with regards to like music that you were going to see and the volume and that correlation to like using that kind of almost because like this is a reason why party with friends, etc.
right, yeah, no, you're right. I was pretty much going to be drinking somewhere anyways, and why not do it, around a bunch of people that are jamming out to some tunes, I would, just being a big music fan, and you never know when the magic's going to happen on stage, and every band's trying to do it, but to actually do it is another thing, and to have that right mix of liquor, weed, maybe some hallucinogenics, and have that mind blowing experience was pretty tricky, not to overdo one thing and still.
Yeah, I mean that's a real triangulation there that that you've got to pinpoint to make it happen. When did you start to notice that it was impacting the day-to-day life and not just like when you were at concerts or hanging with friends?
Well, after like while I was in college, I worked at a liquor store, so I had access to it before I was 21, and I remember just being at home, and I didn't go out, and I would have like a little pint of some Seagram's whiskey or whatever, and I'd be like, I'm not gonna drink it tonight, but like since I had it, I would end up having some, and I'd be like, man, what's wrong with me? I didn't understand that that was already my alcoholism coming too. So, but being hungover at work was never fun. And, so I guess that's how it was impacted was with, the morning afters and uh, not being 100% to, to to work. So
And before we just made the jump from 91 to 98, and I trying to recall exactly correct. You've been sober 6 years. Is that correct?
yes, 6 years.
So, as drugs or substances, whatever, I don't know what words I'm allowed to say on what platforms. I don't really personally care, but as things developed, did you notice, because you mentioned before, a little bit of hallucinogens, some weed, some alcohol, which I mean, in moderation once in a while. Um, did you notice as other drugs started to become more prevalent that you would be using other substances that chose just because people would offer them to you, or did you kind of confine yourself to what you would do?
Uh, no, I mean, I wasn't really offered cocaine until maybe my early 20s or something. And I remember liking it, but I wasn't, I knew it was expensive and it just I didn't have like close friends that were doing it all the time or anything like that, you know. It was just kind of like uh somebody, that I saw once in a while, they'd be doing it and would you know, let me pitch in or something, but it wasn't like I got to get more of that no matter what, you know. And
Yeah, I ask because in my personal concert history, as I started performing and coming up, that was in my experience, what I noticed, one of the biggest differences was not the fact that people were consuming drugs. That was obviously happening. But the volume and the array, let's say, of substances that were being used at that particular time. So we're talking now late 2000s, early 2010s. Everybody was in full bore and full swing of everything, and I unfortunately I've seen it where that where if the, the people some people just have too much too fast and don't slow down. um was there a reckoning or an impetus for you to make this life decision to go on a different path?
y- you mean like getting sober?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so in 2018, I had tried rehab in 2005 because I got in trouble with my employer, and so that I did a IOP, intensive outpatient program for I wasn't going to work. I was just doing this, going to the hospital, and I was able to put together a week completely clean and sober. And after that week, my ex-wife, my wife at the time, she was like, "You did good last week. Let's go out for a drink," you know, and and it was like, it just kicked it off again, and so I managed to keep that job for a while until the progression of my alcoholism got so bad, and uh, we separated. So then, my use just took off, and that's when I did start doing cocaine pretty regularly, and it helped me drink more, and it affected me showing up to work on time and showing up to work in a reasonable state to perform my job. And that's when foreman at work suggested I go to rehab. And I was like, definitely, I knew I needed it. And I, was all for it. I wanted to, I was done, with waking up with hangovers, and I wanted to try something new, I wanted to try a sober life instead of that that old life of being an everyday drinker. After work, am I going to stop at the bar or am I going to stop at the liquor store and go home? And so, unfortunately, so I did an IOP program again in 2018. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to sober up when it was time to go back to work. I, uh, I failed the return to duty drug test. So that was my second chance, and I was terminated from that job. So, yeah, the consequences of my drinking were uh, getting divorced and losing a job that I was making over $100,000 a year at. So,
And and all the while going to a concert a weekend and having a great time. I would imagine
uh,
at the
oh
concert.
yeah, and doing like a lot of fish. Like if Fish did a tour, I would pick like a week and be like, okay, this weekend I could go see shows in uh, at the Gorge, and then during the week they play Tahoe, and then the following weekend they play Bill Graham Center, and I could do all those shows, you know, and wherever, like each tour is different, so.
There's something, and I can only speak on my own experience, and I'm curious to hear, if you'd like to share yours. But I recall in my younger days, seeking out substances more at shows because I felt sort of in a way that that was part of what going to a concert was getting like atrociously fucked up or taking a bunch of alleged substances. And I'm curious if you also felt that sort of relationship with music, going to the volume of concerts that you were going to, if you have that similar view of the symbiotic relationship between um going to see live music and having that kind of reinforce your reasoning for doing it, and that you're going to have a better air quotes for our readers and listeners, a better time at the show.
Of course, wherever the show was, it always started out with a run to the liquor store and getting liquor first, and then going to the lot and trying to find stuff. And, whether it was Molly or LSD or mushrooms, something to enhance the experience. And, you know, didn't really do coke or any heroin or anything. Although I have tried heroin, but it wasn't something that I was seeking out, like, or even in the 2000s with oxys or anything. Luckily, I was fortunate to avoid that whole epidemic.
No, absolutely. And after getting clean, or after rather your the second time going to rehab and going getting clean and restarting your recovery, um how soon was it that you started going to see concerts again? Like, did you feel like you had to wait a certain time, that wasn't an atmosphere you could be in, or did you feel like live music would help more so than be a catalyst or inhibitor?
Great question, because so when I was like doing the IOP and stuff, right? Like they're like, you know, we suggest you go to meetings, we suggest you get a sponsor, we suggest a higher power. And like I did things my way, which is why I struggled to get sober so long. And it took me. It was quite a process for me to do it because I was like, you know, just I'm the type of alcoholic that you can't tell me what to do because I just don't listen to anybody. And I might listen to a foreman at work or something because that's his job is to tell me what to do, right? And like, but as far as living my life, like, that's why me and my dad butted heads growing up because he'd be like telling me what to do and I'd be like, nope, like it just didn't work. So to answer your question though, no, I didn't stop going to shows. Uh, in 2019, I was able to put together a few months and I got involved with the Fish Fellowship, which is their Yellow Balloon group. And I volunteered to help with one of their tables. They have a clean and sober table at Fish concerts, and I volunteered to be a host of the table at down in St. Louis, and so I drove down there from Chicago, and I had 4 months at the time. They usually require you to have a year, but the other person that was helping, he had multiple years, and they couldn't find anybody else. So they said, just yeah, that's cool that you you're willing to help. So I remember walking into the venue. I reached in my pocket to get money for a drink, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, what am I doing? I'm helping with the sober table. I can't be, you know." And
That's self-awareness that you otherwise wouldn't have, though. That's amazing to be able to even to I mean to realize it in the moment and to remember it. I mean, what a great example of the self-realization and awareness that sobriety brings you. I mean,
right,
it's never a bad choice, in my opinion.
right. So that, and then I went on to do multiple shows that tour, and I did Philadelphia or Camden. I stayed in Philadelphia, right across the river, and Blossom in Ohio that year. And then when I came home, it was around the 4th of July, and I relapsed. I started doing cocaine again. And so when the Alpine Valley shows happened in middle of July, I was using for those shows. And and it was weird because I was like, oh, I wonder where the table is, but like I wasn't meant to find the table because I was using, like, and it it was weird, like that I wasn't able to
Those
find the help when I was looking for it, but it was there. I know it was there. I just didn't look hard enough.
Well, for or maybe you just didn't want to see it.
Near,
That's also another good possibility. And for folks who are unaware of what Mike is referring to, it has a lot of, groups for different bands, but the Yellow Balloon organization broadly is a sobriety group that has a table, usually run by volunteers and fans of whatever band it is. I've seen chapters at Ween shows, at Fish shows, at Dead shows. I've heard of them at plenty of other places. And, Steiner, my wife, who's 6 years sober at the time of this taping, that was, I think, the first time we saw Ween together in Minneapolis in 2021, I think. Um, we walked into the venue and got our poster and then saw the Sunny Bunny table, and she was completely blown away. And I was like, yeah, like fans look out for each other. Like that's what we do. And part of recovery is service work and volunteering. And I think it's really commendable that in your return to shows, you brought that with you.
Right. Like pretty much the mission statement of the Yellow Balloon Table is to provide traction in an otherwise slippery environment. So, because of all the drug use and alcohol around surrounding concerts, there's a place to go if you are tempted. And, if somebody pulls out a baggie of powder and starts shoving things up their nose, you could, go to the table and be
There's
like, hey,
Yeah, there's resources.
right.
Yeah, there's resources for you. And
Right.
and unironically, before the interview, I was listening to the Little Feat song "Easy to Slip." It's so easy to slip. It's so easy to fall. And just remember that wherever you are, there there is help there. If you look in the right places, if you're looking for it, you'll find it, right?
Right.
And
Asking
this
for
is
help is
one
one of the hardest
thing.
things to do.
Absolutely. And, I've had only a couple of experiences where I've provided that sort of help to someone at a show. And it's sad to me that not everybody would, if they see someone in distress, just go help that person. But they're, unfortunately, despite being in an industry that is, I think, saturated, is putting it lightly, with substances, the fact that there's still stigma around it is really disappointing, especially with all of the dangerous things that are out there these days. I mean, if people need to have resources and options and assistance, at places where there's otherwise no one else looking out for them.
Right. So, getting back to it, that was 2019 where I had slipped. Probably didn't give myself enough time to focus on my sobriety and and so then after that, 2020 came and COVID happened. That gave me the chance to really focus on my sobriety, uh, focus on building new good habits instead of those bad habits that I was so ingrained in using. Like my car was on autopilot to go to the bar and liquor store. You know, so it was to break that
It's
habit.
really interesting. It's really interesting you say that, because I often, when I was a teacher, I put to my students, one of my favorite poems is the I forget I forget two paths diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by.
Right.
We're always in life at a fork in the road. We always have to make a decision one way or another, and part of the human condition is that we don't get the luxury of being able to pause at the fork in the road and spend X amount more time to judge which path we should take. We have to make these decisions as they come. We are not afforded the luxury of being able to pause life or time and try to collect our thoughts to make an instant decision. We are consistently faced with these diverging paths, and it's really fascinating to me to hear that the impact that the path you took when the pandemic hit was to focus on your sobriety rather than, because I mean, let's face it, we both know it could have easily gone the other way. I mean, there are two clear paths there. You know, it could be building and it could be destruction.
For sure. I mean,
And it's
that was a time
incredible that
where
you chose building.
uh, during that time was like the best time for an addict and an alcoholic because we like to isolate and so like to be forced to stay at home. And what do? You go to the liquor store and you get a bunch of booze and you have a party by yourself and or you go get some drugs and you isolate. So I remember making that decision, should I just say fuck it, the world's coming to an end, or should I by then, I was already trying to get sober for so long that I did a lot of work, and I was like, I'm pretty close. I'm pretty close. If I could, like, so it was a
That's
trying time, but luckily I got through it.
again, I think that speaks to the level of self awareness, and that's a key element of it, being far along enough to which you can see it clearly in the rearview mirror and say, no, I don't want to go back to where I was. That's a very important aspect of it. And yeah, and then, really, at that point in time, we had nothing to do but reckon with ourselves. And, you know, it really took a toll on so many, but I'm glad to hear that for you it had somewhat of a positive impact on your, not, I mean, not somewhat, a positive impact on your life.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and when the lockdown happened and everything, somebody started a Zoom meeting which involved the Fish Fellowship. And so a group of us would, every night at 6 o'clock Central, we get on there and we got to know each other, and we were like, we couldn't wait for shows to start happening again. And when we did, like, we all got together and like it was like we knew each other for years. It was so cool to be able to hang out with people in real life. And I,
It's also pretty incredible when you access and find another community doing the same thing that you do that are sober. I mean, like, again, what I mean, like, having that as a part of, what was that like initially when you're able to go to shows and start meeting up with some of these people? What were some of the feelings that you had at these shows, and um, how did that give you strength when as you continued on?
yeah, so like I said, the isolation that comes with addiction and alcoholism, well, connection is the opposite of that. So to be able to connect with people and, just the hugs and the smiles and the dancing, we'd all be dancing and smiling at each other, and uh, that's all I wanted was to belong, and it helped
Mhm.
me feel that where I belong there, and you know, uh, just the smiling faces, and the no matter what the band was playing, like I was happy to be there and happy to be a part of it.
That's a very important thing, and I want to hone in on that. Something you just said right there, that sense of community and belonging. And I think that a really good thesis statement for this conversation is that you don't need substances to feel like you belong at live music. Everybody who's there is a part of that community. There's community all around you if you're open to being a part of it, and that isolation, like you were talking about, you know, it put a smile on my face. For our listeners and readers, go subscribe on YouTube. It put a legitimate smile on my face because that's awesome. That's the where you get the pleasure. It's so interesting. Actually, the other day I walked into a local shop, and I blab about the show all the time because if nobody does, or if I don't, nobody will. And one of the guys who works there, who I hadn't seen in a while, said, "Hey, I really liked that interview you did with Turner from the Sandbox channel." I was like, "What?" He was like, "Yeah, yeah, like it was really good, man. Like I'm a huge Widespread fan, and it was really fun to watch." And I'm like, that's all I want out of this. Like that was awesome. Like that was incredible. That's like so when you say like those high fives and those hugs and the dancing, with each other and feeling like belonging, like I understand like what wanting that is like, and I also understand what it's like to look for that in places where it just doesn't exist. And I'm curious to hear your take on how your community, or how your concert attendance rather, continued on, as shows started coming back together. Did you begin to volunteer again as well?
Yeah, and you talk about that self-awareness. I Before I would be, drunk, and I thought everybody else was too, And then when I sobered up, I was like, wow, people don't really drink the way I was drinking, and they don't really, I'll see once in a while I'll see somebody stumbling around, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that was me, so
I just had a moment in my brain where I was like, oh my God, there's a couple of times that I could think of where, like, you see, like, you catch someone's eye and they're looking at you like with like a wink of recognition, and you're like, we are not on the same plane of existence right now, buddy. Like, I don't know what you're on, but I am not. Like, it's like not everybody's in on it like that. Like, not, and but when you're in it, it feels like everybody, like you're that guy being like,
right,
and
right,
and most people though are most people are people. They're just chilling. They're just trying to get some live music.
right,
That's all they're trying to drink.
yeah. So yeah, I got involved with volunteering for the sober tables, and at set break there's a meeting, uh, going to the table before the show, and saying thanks for your service, to the person that's volunteering. Uh, just that connection with other people, like because they were there when I needed them. So I want to be there when the next person comes up and says, hey, I got 6 months, and I finally came back to a show. Well, hey, this is how we do it, feel free, hang out, and we'll be
Yeah.
down, on the right side of the stage. So come join us, and we'll be dancing harder than anybody else around, So,
Well, that's the most important thing, is that you're, you know, providing that presence for other people to see that they're not alone, that, we're not alone. There's always someone going through something. There's always someone trucking through a bad situation or dealing with something in their life. You never know what someone else is going through. It's why one of the messages that, extending on what you were saying about thanking the people who are working at yellow balloon tables for their service, one of the big messages of the show is just thanking in general, everybody working at the venue as well. Who's working there and greeting them with a smile on your face because it costs you nothing and it could really, really, really mean a lot to someone because they could be having a really tough day.
Right. Yeah, one time I remember when I was drunk and I saw the yellow balloon table and I was like, "You're a bunch of drunks. You can't handle your alcohol." And my ex looked at me like, "Are you kidding me? You're gonna be heckling them? Like you belong over there, you know?" And so when I was going to volunteer, there's a list like here's some things to be aware of that you might encounter, and heckling was one of them. And
Oh
and
gosh.
it states in there like they're probably people that do need to come to the table, so have some compassion for them.
And that's at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's not about going up to random people and being like, hey, go to the sober table. It's about providing the presence there for people who are so that they're able to access it when they feel like they need it. Because no one should pick anyone up and drag them over and say you belong there. I think that's just a mean thing to say to someone.
No, I
Um,
can't call anybody an alcoholic and say you need to do that. Like you need to clean
but
up. Like it's something we have to find out on our own.
it's just something that's not within our it's not our right to do that, but providing that visibility for anybody who is struggling or having some difficulty. And yellow balloons are hard to miss, folks. Like look for a yellow balloon at a show. I mean, you'll find a great community of people that are there to give you a helping hand or a shoulder if you need one. So I highly recommend folks when you're out on tour this spring and summer to check out the local or bandical yellow balloon table at your next concert.
Right. And I had somebody come up once and he said, I really need to get sober. What do you recommend? And I was kind of thrown back because we usually deal with people that are already sober. And, like the yellow balloon table can't get anybody sober, especially in one concert, you know. But if you go to detox is the first place to start. Get yourself if necessary a medical detox to do it safely. Detoxing from alcohol can kill, and benzos also,
And
and
opioids.
opioids, right? So
Listen, all folks, all this shit can kill you. Like, I
right,
mean, look, we're not going to be the arbiters of moral justice and truth and say nobody should do any drugs or use any sub. That's not what this is
no,
about.
not at all.
What we're saying is there is an alternative, and you don't need substances. Like, substances do not equal fun at a concert. That's not those two things are correlation is not causation, folks. It is so possible to have an incredible time, a spiritual time at a concert just with the power of music alone. You don't need to add anything to it.
Right.
It's the spice of life.
Yeah. We don't take a stand on alcohol or drug use. We don't uh, say, not to do it or anything like that. That's not what we're there for. We're just uh, there, for the percentage that does have trouble with those with substances. We're there to provide support And you know,
Well, taking it back to that Alpine 21 run, I'm sure there was somebody there that weekend that did find the table
oh yeah,
that was looking for it. And even though you unfortunately didn't that weekend, I'm sure somebody did. And again, it's providing that presence. And really, I think it's an interesting way to put it, but normalizing sobriety in live music and entertainment. Um, Substance abuse, I think, is one of the most stigmatized. Well, actually, I would say this: it's one of the most least stigmatized, yet still least talked about things in the music industry. We just don't do it. And there are great organizations out there like Backline, affording, care and treatment suggestions and options for live touring musicians and their families. There are organizations like Yellow Balloon that may have a chapter table at any given concert. But there is also something I think that is worth mentioning, that we should also have a little hope in each other, that if we're having a tough time, to be able to say to someone else, hey, like, can I talk, or to make a phone call, or to recuse ourselves. But it's always in the moment. We never know when lightning strikes.
yeah, for sure. There's a lot of shame that goes along with addiction and alcoholism. So, I hit it very well, and I I think I hit it very well, but
Yeah, but that,
but other people, they see the signs, right? So, like when I
well,
said I
and
needed
again,
help, it was no big surprise.
right, and this isn't about you specifically. This is just in general, that concept of hiding it, or thinking you're hiding it very well. Which I'm glad you went back and put that little asterisk on it, because that's exactly what it is. It's like you think that you're playing, Mr. Cool, and no, my friend, you are about to be a meme. Like,
Right.
you are not, like, that is not like what's happening today. And the sooner you recognize that, the better it'll be for your health. A lot of our typical listeners, readers, and viewers who are tuning into this interview are probably wondering to themselves, why is this interview happening? Where does this fit into the grand scheme of secondhand talent? And, you know, this interview is being filmed shortly after the passing of Mr. Bobby Weir. And I had the privilege, a few weeks prior, of writing the song histories for Fish.net for Playing in the Band and Samson and Delilah. And Playing in the Band, obviously, was a song written by Bob Weir. Um, it was an incredible opportunity to be able to add that now, especially now looking back at the events that have happened recently. In my essay for Samson and Delilah, which I also had the opportunity to mention, there's the famous lyric, if I had my way, I would tear this whole building down. And in that essay, I make the argument that the fans are secondhand talent. We are secondhand talent in the grand scheme of things, because at the end of the day, the way a concert works is that we show up to go hear the music. We are a part of it. And it matters to me to have a fan's perspective on this show, not just who is a lifelong fan of live music, but someone who has made massive changes in his lifestyle and has continued to love live music throughout. it's worth it to me to capture these stories and these experiences, because if we don't speak about them, we don't know if these words may help someone else, right? And like Bobby and Jerry saying, let the words be yours, I'm done with mine. And that's what I hope to often impart with these interviews, is that just somebody takes away a little, nugget of wisdom. And I think it's really important to provide a platform to a fan who is sober and going to concerts one day at a time. I think it's incredibly important to remind folks that they are not alone if they are doing the same thing, and that community and help is abundant and all around you.
Yeah, I thought with the end of my drinking was the end of me having fun, but uh, you know, since I got involved in the sober community, just having so much more fun now and actually remembering it.
One of the biggest, I don't regret things in my life. There are things that maybe I would do differently if given the chance, but I have no regrets, because every action that I've taken has made me the person I am today. Uh, but that is something in particular that I really appreciate about going to shows sober, is being able to remember them, and being able to have something that's not just a foggy haze of a memory that you have a couple pictures from, that you were so out of it that you barely remember going to. It's a pleasure that I didn't realize existed until I got older. Not to say that I ever was at a period of time where, I felt really like out of control with any sort of substance use, but I always did feel like you were saying, it added to the fun, and that not using substances would take that away. And I, like you, had a very similarly pleasant, surprising experience when I found out that no, actually, when you take substances away, that does not take any joy away from hearing and taking in live music with your friends. It's a beautiful thing.
For sure. It truly beautiful. I mean, just the the amount of gratitude that I have uh, to be able to do it, and that I don't have to have those 8 beers before the show starts, and be searching for substances, and I'm more in the moment, and I'm more aware. You mentioned self-awareness earlier. I'm more aware, and it's just the music is more beautiful, instead of being blurred, or because there was a time when I didn't get excited for concerts. I still went, but it was just
Mm.
like routine, like ho hum, and because alcohol dulled my senses, and I didn't get excited about things. But that excitement is back, and sometimes it's the excitement of seeing my friends more than the music. But um, for sure, there's moments with the music that are just so mind blowing, and to hear the roar of the crowd when that jam is hitting, and like you said, the band plays to the crowd, and the crowd plays to the band, and they feed off of each other, and uh, and to be in the middle of it, and to have my senses working at full, capabilities, is being able to soak it in, and just I'm getting chilled right now thinking about it. So,
It's a real beautiful thing. I mean, it really is, like it's an incredible thing to, and I always think of that song. I wish I knew. I wish I knew what I know now when I was younger. Um, I always I wish that I look through my ticket stub book sometimes and what we're just trying hard to remember just that show, and like some of them I just can't,
right.
from 15-ish years ago. And I'm like, man, wow, like I was there for that show. That I don't remember this at all. And and it may jog some memory occasionally, but lately, even though we don't really have, ticket stubs the way we used to, I find that I don't really need that as much to remember that I was at a concert because I'm present and was at the concert. And before we leave off for this week's interview, I'm curious to know if you have any words of advice for anybody who might be struggling. What words of wisdom you might have to share before we wrap up.
Well, I was on that merry-go-round of I'll try and get help after the holidays. I'll try and get help after the new year. And I was on that merry-go-round, and you know, I wish I had done it when I first realized I needed it. And, like I mentioned before, it's really hard to ask for help, but help is available, whether it's, a detox at a hospital or talking to your doctor, or also 12-step groups, AA, NA, MA, whatever A, fill in the blank. But, and then there's also ones that are not, you know, with a higher power, there's like, smart recovery or whatever, uh, there is help available. So, uh, it's all you gotta do is, pick up the Google machine and, you know, and you could find something.
That's the scientific term.
Right. So, just getting that ball rolling. And like we said, nobody could call you an alcoholic or an addict. It's something that you kind of got to realize yourself, like if you're thinking about going to an AA meeting, you most likely have a problem. Most people that show up there, they don't just show up there because nothing is going on. There's usually something going on, and if these substances are causing consequences in your life, you could change that. And don't let these things rule your life. Like I was a slave to alcohol, and I'm not anymore. I made the change, and it was hard. Don't get me wrong. I know how hard it is, but it's worth it. Your life is worth it. You rebuild relationships that you might have damaged, and it's so much better this way to live life clean and sober, and instead of relying on substances to get through life. Because, like you said, no regrets. I don't have regrets about living my life drunk, but uh, I just didn't know any better, and that I was stuck in it. It had a hold of me, and to be able to break free is so freeing, and it, it's just amazing.
Uh, Thank you very much. I mean, that was That was incredible. And just to pull one little piece out of that, folks, this is not in any way to call anyone out, but if you're listening to this interview and you're thinking, hey, maybe rehab might be a good option for me, maybe Gamblers Anonymous, what Mike said, whatever it is, if you're hearing this interview and you're thinking to yourself, it maybe be a good idea for me to check out a meeting, go to a meeting. It won't hurt. And you're going to be with a group of people that are going through what you're going through. And, once in a while you can get shown the light in the strangest of places if you look at it right. You just got to keep your eyes open and keep on looking, because that help and that companionship and that assistance is out there, and it is sometimes right there along with the music. Folks, this is Steiner with another episode of Secondhand Talent. Mike, thank you so much for being on the show, and we will see you next Wednesday.
Thanks for having me.
And that's podcast.